Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of HackerEarth webinars. And I'm glad to be here today, and I hope that each one of you is doing pretty well in these unprecedented and pretty, unusual times that we are in right now. Uh, a little bit about the platform first. People, so this is the GoToWebinar platform, and if you have any questions, you can write those questions on the questions panel there, and we'll be happy to address them as and when you ask. So here's a little bit about today's session. Hi, this is me, Arbaz. I am the engagement lead at HackerEarth, and today I have with me someone very special, someone who's done a lot of campus recruiting in the last few years. So it is none other than the beautiful lady on the left, Emily Durham, who is the senior campus recruiter at Intuit. So hi, Emily.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great, excited to learn a little more about HackerEarth and also share all the goodies about student recruitment.
Perfect. So today's session is all about campus recruitment, and Emily will be sharing the new world of campus recruitment as to how you can, upskill yourself as a campus recruiter, or if you're not a campus recruiter, you can just get to know about how you can, indulge into campus recruitment as well. So before we start off with today's session, I'll tell you a little bit about HackerEarth and what we do as a company. So we believe that tech skills is the most valued global currency at this stage, and we stand by this as well. We believe that organizations are pretty much betting big on the currency to drive innovation as well as growth. So when I say this, and any kind of a company, I mean, we usually used to think about software-based companies about 10 years ago who would be looking to hire developers. But now if we see the current scenario, we believe that all kinds of organizations, such as the non-conventional ones, such as Walmart or let's say a FedEx for that, all of them across the globe require developers. But this is the hard part. I mean, technical recruitment is pretty hard. So these are some stats around technical recruitment. It's around 50 to 60 days taken to close a position, 10,000 plus hours spent in human screening, 6 rounds on an average for any candidate to go through. And the last point, a pretty big thing that burns a hole in everyone's pocket. It's none other than the average cost to hire. That's close to $30,000. So these are the few challenges that we think recruiters across the globe face. First of them being assessing candidates quickly while saving on costs. Cost is a factor that all companies want to save on. Similarly, identifying top candidates accurately. It's more important to have people with the right skills rather than having people with fancy resumes. It's always good to have people who know the task rather than, people who have just few big skills on their resumes. The third one is really important in today's world, that is understanding the expectations of your candidate. It's very important. I guess Emily will also be sharing a few insights on this one because, understanding your candidate is pretty important in today's candidate-driven recruitment market. Last but not the least, something that all of you might be facing right now, that is the battle against remote hiring. I mean, these times right now are pretty unprecedented and all companies have to go remote. Similarly, recruiters have to, maintain business continuity and they have to do their jobs as well. So this is how we help companies drive innovation and growth. We have 3 offerings. The first one being a developer assessment platform that is used to assess candidates. Your candidates, you can send them tests and they can take those tests based on their performance. You can choose if you want to bring them to a remote hiring tool. So we have a remote hiring tool that we call as Face Code. It helps you in remotely interviewing certain candidates who you think have passed your first round of assessment, that is the developer assessment. And the third thing that we offer companies is virtual hackathons. Now, this is a managed service and something that we proudly are, offering all companies at this stage. So by hackathons, I mean, it does not have to be a tech-related hackathon. It can be a hackathon to build a good talent pipeline for a recruiter. It can be a hackathon around employer branding or even upskilling your employees. So a hackathon can be any kind of a hackathon. So this is virtual hackathons that we provide, and this is a managed service, so we handle it end to end. So now quickly I'll run you through all of these features. So the assessment platform that we have is totally AI based, in which you can assess a candidate for 500 skills in 35 plus programming languages. Apart from this, there's Another 7 spoken languages that we support that include French, Portuguese, Spanish, English, Chinese, Japanese, and one more. Sorry for forgetting that. And the second point is very important, the robust proctoring settings that we have. It's very important to, avoid the candidate to use unfair means. You don't want to have any kind of false negatives while you assess your candidates. The third part here is really interesting. It's about automatic creation of tests. So once you upload a job description or a job role on the platform magically, automatically takes keywords from these two documents, let's say in a PDF file that you upload, and builds a test based on the skills that are required in that particular job role or job description. So this is done automatically. Then the last part here is in-depth analytics. That is something that hiring managers are pretty particular about. They want to know about the candidate performance, what was his weak points, what is his plus points, everything about analytics, and that's what hiring managers love to do. The second thing is HackerEarth Face Code. So this is for remote tech interviews. You can invite your candidate, you can ask him to code live right in front of you. You can evaluate his coding skills in real time, and also share an instant feedback about the candidate as well. So you can have multiple people, you can have yourself, a hiring manager, 2 more people on the panel, and ask the candidate to join, and you can judge their skills live. This is why you love Face Code. It saves you time and money. You don't have to ask your candidate to travel all the way to your office. The second is evaluate across languages, 30 plus supported languages, robust compiler, not just one-to-one interviews. You can invite your panelists, as I told you before, and real-time evaluation. Another plus point, you don't have to wait for the candidate code to run. You can see it right in front of you. And the candidate history, very important. You have to track the candidate's performance throughout, from his assessment to his interview. So this helps you there. Why HackerEarth for hackathons? This is the last offering that we have. So we have a developer community of 4 million plus. And out of these 4 million plus community members that we have almost 110K ideas on the platform, with 22,000 nearly prototypes that have been built. Over 1,500 hackathons we've conducted for different companies from different industries, different domains, 500 plus locations from where our developers participate. And we have a tie-up with almost 450 plus global universities to drive your hackathons for you. So this is the recruitment for tomorrow. We believe that everything has to go remote, as we are presently doing, from sourcing, screening, interviewing to actually hiring your candidates. So it all has to move remote. So this is the complete suite for you that we have, from assessing your candidates to interviewing them, as well as making them participate in hackathons. Again, hackathons can be internal hackathons for your company or external hackathons for building a talent pipeline. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. These are a few customers that we have on board who have been using our services and love us. And without wasting any more time, I know you guys are here to listen to Emily and not me. So I'll quickly switch over to Emily now, and over to you, Emily. Hope everyone has a great session today. A few ground rules. So we'll be recording this session, so you don't have to worry about missing out on anything. We'll be sharing these recordings with you post the session is done. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on the questions panel, and me and Emily will be there to monitor those questions. Over to you, Emily. Hope everyone has a great session.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think everyone can see my screen. So with that being said, we're going to jump right in. So first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to spend a little bit of time this afternoon or morning, based on where you are with me. My inner Star Wars nerd is going to pop out a little bit during this presentation, but I want to take you on a journey to discover the new world of student and campus recruitment. So with that being said, I'm Emily Durham, as I'm sure you're tired of hearing by now. I'm a senior recruiter at Intuit in our Toronto office, and I've been at Intuit for just about 8 months. And prior to that, I was at the Bank of Montreal for about 4 years in all of our student recruitment programs. So have done everything from capital markets and investment banking now to the technology and design space, and also have dabbled in, the fun world of tax and things like that. And what's really been quite a bit of fun in my role as I've been able to both execute and strategize on our co-op, internship, and full-time programs. So everything from the recruitment marketing all the way through into the student experience, been there, done that. I'm going to give you all of the important tips and tricks for you to be able to launch this at your company as well. And I am such a talent nerd that in my free time, I also have a podcast, The Straight Shooter Recruiter. And that really is kind of a quick summary of me. And I would love for us to jump right in. If you do have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to pop them in at the end of every slide, and we'll be answering kind of as we progress. So really the purpose of today, we're really focusing on what I think are the three core areas of campus recruitment, which is understanding your audience, understanding what experience your audience wants to have, and then having the tools to execute. So when we think about the audience, we're going to spend a little bit of time understanding what students expect, who are the new student generations, and then moving into the experience, what do these students expect in terms of the recruitment process? What do they expect day one on their internship or on their full-time role? And then I'll give you some kind of low-hanging fruit or some easy ways to do a really good job of executing in terms of the student experience. So with that being said, let's jump in to kind of some baseline information. So I always like to start off with what campus recruitment is not. For starters, campus recruitment, although it is very budget friendly and can often be seen as an easy way to bring in cheap labor or coffee runners or admin help, campus recruitment isn't just an avenue to cheap labor. It is a benefit that you get to hire this wonderful, talent, fresh set of minds for typically shorter work term, probably a little less compensation than what you would hire a permanent full-time employee for. But that's really not the purpose or the core value of campus recruitment. Another thing campus recruitment is not, is it is not boring. You really are going to be on your toes and moving with upcoming generations, understanding what industries are emerging and diving right in to update your strategies as they come. So if that's everything campus recruitment is not, then what is campus recruitment? So in my mind, campus recruitment is the strategic intersection between recruitment, marketing, and events planning. All of that is going to make sense in a second, I promise, just bear with me. So like I mentioned, campus recruitment isn't just a pathway for inexpensive labor. It's really an opportunity to invest in your company's future leaders, movers, shakers, and innovators. And when it's done right, you're also going to see an uptick in things like brand recognition and in other areas of your company's metrics like diversity and innovation and productivity. Okay. So before I tell you how to build a campus program, it's really important to understand why campus recruitment matters beyond just grabbing a couple of extra students for summer help. So if you do a campus strategy properly, you're going to have a better today and a better tomorrow. So what does that mean? For a better today, immediately you're going to see an uptick in your diversity. So today's generation of students is the most diverse yet, and that's statistically based off of ethnic diversity as well as diversity of experience and academics. And you might be wondering what the diversity of experience looks like. When it comes to hiring students today, whether it's for internship or full-time roles, you're going to get direct line of sight into emerging industries, technologies, and ways of thinking. Why? Because they're fresh out of school and new concepts are notoriously tested and brought to light in the top academic programs. So this is a great way to get your company a step ahead in terms of what's upcoming in your industry. The next piece of this is innovation. These students are eager. The world has not beaten them down yet like it has for you or I, and they are ready to put the pedal to the metal and start working. So their learning curve is going to be a lot shorter than you expect, which is going to boost your company's innovation as well as productivity. And above all, outside of what we're looking at for just today's benefits, when we think about what will happen tomorrow or a few years down the line, if you're able to bring in these students and give them a great experience, you are naturally going to have a pipeline for future talent. So if you bring in an awesome set of interns and they had an amazing experience, they are going to be itching to apply for your full-time roles. If you bring in great full-time new graduate talent, they're going to be itching to get promoted into that senior or that manager position. But what I think, in my mind, is the most valuable long-term about campus recruitment is once you bring these students on from intern and then converting them to full-time, they're not going anywhere. Retention rates for interns who are converted into full-time roles after they graduate is 62.4% over the period of 5 years versus 48% for people who have not interned at your company. So the retention rates alone are a massive win if you can deliver great experiences. Okay, so again, before we dive right into the strategy, it's important that we have these key pieces covered just to make sure that your strategy isn't casting your net too wide or casting your net in places maybe it does not belong. So the first thing you and your hiring team will want to determine is what kind of a hire are you really trying to make? Are you making a full-time new graduate hire? So are you looking for someone who graduated a year ago, a month ago, or will graduate at the end of April? Are you looking for an intern? So someone who's going to come in over the course of the summer? Or are you looking for a co-op, which is a student where their academic program requires them to take a work term, and that could be in the summer, spring, or fall. So those are just some things to start thinking about. And on top of that, what kind of student are you looking for? An undergrad, a master's student, PhD, perhaps you're even going as junior as high school. And what kind of program are you targeting? Are you looking at STEM, so science, tech, engineering, math, or are you focusing on the business side of things? The other thing you want to look at is what type of school you're looking at. So whether the location is relevant for you, perhaps you would like to hire local talent, the reputation of the school, or if that school has an accredited co-op program. Okay, so in theory, you have that checklist completed. You know exactly what you're looking for. You know exactly what campus recruiting is and isn't. It's time for us to get into the fun stuff. And I was not kidding when I said my space nerd was going to come out in this presentation. So like I said, we're starting with the audience, then going right into the experience and heading right into the execution. This is arguably one of my favorite parts of the presentation because I find this information so fascinating. So the first thing I want us to understand is that recruitment for a really long time has been focused on millennials. How do we hire millennials? What do millennials want? Millennials want a job hop. Millennials want this. But now that millennials at their oldest are in their mid to late 30s, they're no longer the generation that we're hiring for student talent. The generation you're targeting now is Gen Z. So those who are born 1996 into the 2010s. That is your current generation of interns, co-ops, and full-time hires. Why this is important is Gen Z hires have fundamentally different needs, interests, and ways of working. So it's important for us to understand how they operate in order for us to bake that into our strategy to make sure that we're targeting them in the right way and delivering experiences that exceed their expectations. So quickly, to no one's surprise, Gen Z is digital, but beyond digital, they're mobile. So millennials were really focused on computer-based systems. They were on their laptops. The current generation, so our Gen Z, is really focused on mobile experiences. They also buy into this always-on culture. So think about it. This generation has been raised with Netflix, Amazon. They have access to information, movies, food, Ubers at the click of a button, or at the tap of a screen. It takes seconds for them to get what they want, which is probably why their attention span is about 8 seconds when they're on their phone versus millennials, that was 12 seconds. That's a huge difference, and I'll get into why that matters in just a second. But something else that's interesting about this group is they're starting their job search early. So students have reported already thinking about what their full-time job will be as early as their second year of university. So these kids are 18, 19 years old, already thinking about their career trajectory, which means we need to be accessible and be the first person to give them information if we want to hire them. Another thing I'd like to call out before I tell you a little bit more about what this means is the audience that we're focusing on is really experience oriented. So they're really focusing on having experiences or development opportunities to collaborate over products or over extremely high compensation. So growth and collaboration are actually the number one things they're looking for when they're looking for an intern or full-time position. So it's really important for us to have those opportunities, for that to be something managers are able to execute on, but likewise for that to be something we're really clearly marketing throughout the recruitment process. Great. So I just threw a whole bunch of information at you, and it's time for us to dive a little bit deeper and understand what all of these things actually mean for recruitment. So when I spoke a little bit about this always-on culture, It doesn't mean that we need to be accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But honestly, it does mean that we need to be accessible, whether it's email, LinkedIn, or perhaps your company has an AI chatbot that you're using on your career website. It means we need to be accessible beyond the average 9 to 5. It doesn't mean to be, 7 days a week, but we can't close our laptops at 4:30 because students want answers now. And if we're able to give them answers quickly or respond to their questions quickly, that will make a difference. We also know that this group of students is spending almost 16 hours a week on their smartphones alone. So we need to be where they are. We need to have, proper recruitment marketing that is able to show in terms of design and clarity on their mobile devices. We also need to make sure that we're on social media in ways that make sense for them. Again, given that their attention span is about 8 seconds long, it's important that everything we do is clear, memorable, and has very clear, calls to action for these students. Because if there is pages and pages of text and images and this and that, and they don't really know what the key takeaway is from either your advertisement or your job description, you've lost them. The other thing that's important in terms of their desire to invest in experiences over products and their focus on growth and collaboration is recruiters need to be career coaches. They don't need to be recruiters. And I want to spend a second on this because in my mind, this is the fundamental difference between recruiting, standard full-time folks and recruiting students. Students don't want recruiters. Students want career coaches. And more than ever, I've seen an uptick in students ask questions about things that have nothing to do with my company or nothing to do with my job description. They're starting more and more to ask questions about interviews at other companies. They're going to ask you to tear up their resume. They're going to ask for mock interviews, even if it's not tied to a role you're recruiting for. And at first, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel like you're giving this candidate all the skills they need to go work at Google or to go work at Apple and not to work at your company. But again, if you commit to doing the right thing and being a career coach for the student, trust me when I say they will return. Trust me when I say they will sign your offer instead of other ones. So big emphasis on this shift from being a recruiter trying to fill a spot at your company versus being a career coach who is dedicated to transparent and honest advice for these students nonstop. I can pause there. Are there any questions that I've missed? Great. I'm going to take silence as everything is good for now. And if there are questions.
I guess we don't have any questions as of now, so we'll go ahead.
Awesome. Sounds good. Great. So we've spent a little bit of time understanding on a deeper level who these students are, what they expect. We know they're mobile. We know they have shorter attention spans than millennials. And we know that they're really experience driven. So although they're on their phones quite a bit, they really want that one-on-one connection and to feel special, so to speak, and to feel like you really have invested in their career and development. So let's focus on the execution. In my mind, there are 4 kind of key areas that are really easy to do very well and really easy in terms of starting to build your campus strategy. And of course, there is so much more than just these 4 pieces on this slide, but these are kind of the basics that you can excel at really easily, and then from there continue to build your program. So one of the first things that's very important is upgrading your job postings, and I'll get into that in the next slides. The next thing you want to do is amp up your recruitment marketing. You want to have amazing and impactful interviews, and you want to have a continued connection. So we'll dive into each of these pieces with some key takeaways as we go. Okay, so we're upgrading our job postings. The reason that this is so important is really the job posting is probably the first interaction a candidate is going to have with you online. It's really unlikely that they're just going to search your company up and add you on LinkedIn or actively check your career page unless they're looking for a job. So if your job descriptions are, 4 pages long, aren't really clear with what you're looking for, you've lost them in their 8-second window. So we're going to focus on 2 things. Thing number 1 is what you post. Thing number 2 is where you post. So students more and more want really authentic and casual language. They don't want to feel like they're reading an academic paper. They don't want any fluff. They don't want any kind of extra sentences that don't need to be there. They want you to be right to the point and tell them exactly what you expect from them in this role. And I'll show you a great example of a job description from GitHub on the next slide. The other thing that's really interesting to call out is that candidates are much more likely to read your full job description and apply if you include media links. So embedding a video or embedding quotes, and something that I've done in almost all of my job descriptions that I love is I get a direct quote from a former intern or a former co-op who's worked on this team before, and I get them to summarize why they would recommend this job to a friend in 4 sentences. And that's actually the first paragraph of all of my job descriptions. So that kind of adds a little bit more personality and makes it feel less stuffy and corporate and more like they're learning and about to kind of invest in their career by applying. The second thing that's really important is where you post. So naturally, we know these students are on LinkedIn, Indeed, on your career website, all of that great stuff. But it's really important for us to make sure that we're posting beyond what the average kind of job boards are. So you're going to post to LinkedIn, all of these great websites, and that's wonderful. But you really need to focus your efforts on your target schools. So that's why that was very important in our pre-strategy checklist. If you know what top 5 or 6 schools you want to target, it's really important that you build relationships with that school. So you might reach out and grab a coffee with them, or in situations like this, have a virtual coffee with them, and actually get the schools to post your job descriptions to their school's job board. In addition to that, once you start to build a really good relationship with these schools, they're starting to recommend students to you. So many times I have sent over a job description to, I'll start with, one of my favorites, University of Waterloo. I've said, I've got a great internship position. Can you please post it so all of your students can see? And oftentimes they'll come back and say, yes, and actually these few students I think would be great. Why don't you reach out to them directly? So they'll actually start to do some of your sourcing once you have that relationship and get into the flow. And so many wonderful schools, across the world in North America do this. So it's a great opportunity to really zone in on the target area that you want. Okay, I promised a good job description and I will not disappoint. So apologies if it is a little blurry. Gotta love screenshot, but here is what I think a great job description is directly from GitHub. So you'll see.
Sorry. Before we move ahead, we have a couple of questions. So I don't want to, give out the reference stuff for you. So we have 2 questions from Ian. So the first one is, how do you keep Gen Z engaged? And do they stay at their position long term, or do they tend to leave a company after a year or 2?
That's a great question. So I'll start with the second one. So Gen Z tends to leave jobs within 3 to 4 years when we're talking about full-time. So it is almost double what was expected of millennials, which was 1 to 2 years. So it's less of that gig economy approach, but honestly expect to lose them after, 4.5 to 5 years, I would say, at a max. And in terms of how to keep them engaged throughout the recruitment process, for me, the number one piece of it is they will stay engaged so long as you act like a career coach. The second they feel like you're trying to sell them on a role or sell them on an opportunity, they're out. But if you give them the space to kind of ask questions or take some time to think about things and come back, and you really have a unique relationship with them, I find that they stay really engaged throughout the process. And kind of in front of that, so before you even get them involved in the recruitment process, I would say just being really consistent with your online branding that we'll get into in a second is a great way to keep them engaged before they apply. And then during the true recruitment process, just making sure that you act as that career coach, they'll be locked in. They really want to feel like they have a career advisor on their side, and that's something that they won't give up easily. I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to follow up.
Perfect. So another question is storytelling an effective thing when it comes to job posting?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the first part of it.
So is storytelling effective in job posting? I mean, telling a story through your job posting, is it a good practice?
Yeah, I definitely think it can be. I would say I've seen it done really well, and I've also seen it become like a short novella of why the company is great, which is what we want to avoid. So if you can tell a story kind of in that intro paragraph that's 3 to 4 sentences long, and perhaps you carry that theme throughout the job description, I think that's a great way to engage with the students and feel, authentic and casual and straightforward. I would just avoid it becoming, a bit of a short novella about why the company is wonderful.
So that answers both the questions that we had. Now we can move ahead.
Amazing. Thank you. Great, and that's a actually perfect question to segue back into this slide. So this is a great example of the job description that, in my mind, does a pretty great job. So at the beginning, you've got a very simple explanation of duties. It is no fluff. This is the job. Do you like it or not? The next part is the spotlight on core values. So talking a little bit about the culture, the opportunities to collaborate. You'll see words like work better together. Remember, this is important to Gen Z. They want to collaborate, they want to grow, they want experiences, not just high compensation, although I'm sure they'd never say no to a raise. And then your next pieces are looking at definitions of success and top performers. They want to know exactly what is expected of them right off the gate. You've got these great headers, you've got a couple of bullets, but not, a page long of bullets of responsibilities or qualifications. And you've got this fun kind of casual language throughout. It's you're good at, it's extra awesome. Students are no longer interested in applying for jobs that say required skills, additional skills. They want something that feels like they're talking to a friend. Again, that career coach mentality. Great. Okay. So at this stage, you've got a great job description. It's clear, it's simple. Maybe you've told a story or two. Maybe you've thrown in some quotes, some videos. It's short, to the point. Your student is engaged. Something else you can do while you're amping up your job descriptions is beefing up your recruitment marketing. So recruitment marketing, I want to emphasize, is not something that you do right before you're about to hire. So if you know you're going to hire some summer interns, don't just start recruitment marketing, in April. This is something that's an ongoing process to make sure that you're always engaging with students, understanding their needs, and that your brand is recognizable. So the first kind of low-hanging fruit that you can focus on with recruitment marketing is your online presence. This is really easy to do. So remembering that students are mobile, remembering students have a slightly shorter attention span than our millennial friends, it's really important that your career website and your LinkedIn profile, so your company's career sites and LinkedIn, is crisp, clear, and to the point. You really want the page to be simple. You want it to have examples of your culture, examples of jobs, locations, with clear calls to action. You don't want your career page to be something they need to read all the way through to understand what you're looking for. You want to have nice call outs. And if we have some time at the end, I'll open up one of the links to job websites that I think are great from the Dollar Shave Club. I think they do an awesome job of our student recruitment page. The other thing that, again, is a bit of a fundamental shift is, in addition to your company's career websites and LinkedIn, your recruiters are influencers. And if you're at a smaller company and you don't have recruiters for, campus recruitment specifically, your managers can also be influencers. So it's important that your recruiters are actively engaging with the student population through their LinkedIn or their social media channels to be currently, up to date on what students are asking, on what students want to know more on, what makes students feel comfortable, and maybe what gives them a little bit of anxiety in the job process. So encouraging your recruiters to post meaningful content consistently, as well as having a really clear company structure online, is a huge win. Low-hanging fruit, that's easy. So you've got that nailed. Next step is going to be focusing on events. This is something that is inherently different in campus recruiting. In standard full-time recruitment, events are not a thing. But events are really the bread and butter of campus recruitment. And part of that is because students' schools or their academic programs naturally have events baked into their student experience. So schools are always pushing for their students to get the best internship or the best full-time job. So they host tons of amazing events like career fairs or information sessions that they'll often invite employers to participate in. So the easiest and honestly very cost-effective way to engage with students is to go to these school-run events. And a lot of those will be things like career fairs. My only tip for these school-run events is A, make sure that the target audience you're looking at is invited. So instead of going to an event with 6,000 people for every single faculty in a school, maybe you just go to an event that targets the specific faculty you're looking at. So maybe it's business, or maybe it's computer science. The other thing that I really encourage, and naturally we're in a webinar, so this works out a little bit too well, is host webinars. If you don't have the capacity for your team to drive out to all of these different schools and go to these school-run events, host an online session. You can advertise it online to all of the different schools you want to target by emailing your schools and saying, hey, I'm hosting an event. Can you advertise it with the students? And having your recruiters, AKA your influencers, post links to this event. You can do webinars on anything. It could be, how to have a great interview, how do you ace your resume, or maybe it's just a Q&A session. So those are some easy kind of low-hanging fruit events. So when it comes to events, you've got this online option. You have this amazing option to join the events that your schools will offer you. But if you're feeling wild and want to step it up a notch, you can actually host your own in-person events at the school. And I think these are the most high value, highest return on investment events because, like I said, the Gen Z population wants face-to-face connection. They want to feel that one-on-one, session. So having an in-person event, and maybe you do an information session. So careers in technology at Intuit is one that I host quite a bit. When I was at the Bank of Montreal, it was careers in capital markets, coffee chats. Come in, let's talk about careers in CM. So having those are a little bit harder to plan because you do need to build out the content. You do need to have a full team there. You need to reserve the space. So they are a wee bit pricier, but you're going to get really high ROI on those. Next. So the easiest of these three was online. The second easiest is events. The trickiest or the most advanced are ambassadors. So ambassadors can be really anything your company needs them to be, but at the kind of definition or the core of what an ambassador is your goal is for the students you hire to go back to their schools and share how awesome you are. You want them to go back to school and talk to their friends about the best internship they've ever had. You want them to tweet about it. You want them on Instagram. You want them on Facebook. You want them spreading the good word. And how do you do that? There's a lot of options. I've seen some companies buy all of their interns lots of swag, so backpacks with their brand on it, hats, turtlenecks, the whole shebang. They send them back to school. They're wearing all of this great company swag, and it's a conversation starter to build your brand. You can make it a little bit more structured. Some companies, especially in banking and consulting, will give students a stipend throughout the year. So maybe it's a couple $100, maybe it's $1,000. And they say, we're going to ask you to have coffee chats with some students. Maybe you ask for them to do one coffee chat a month with a high potential student, or you can even invite them to come to your events on campus to share their experience. So there's lots of opportunity, and it really depends on what you're looking for. But campus ambassadors at their core are just students you've already hired who are going back to school, who had such an amazing time that they have to tell everyone they know. I'll pause there because that was a lot of me talking, and give a chance for any questions to come through.
So Emily, we have a lot of questions. So I guess if we actually take them at the end. So
perfect. Let's do that. Amazing. Sounds good. Okay. So at this stage, like I said, I'll quick recap because that's how my very type A brain works. We've got great job descriptions. You've got an amazing online presence. You've done some events, and it's time for interviews. So this is what the student experience should feel like during interviews. And that's really the focus of today is what are students expecting at all of these different stages. So much like your job descriptions, students want to understand the interview process from the beginning. They want to know exactly what the teams are looking for. They want to know what kinds of questions they're going to be asked. They want to know if I'm going to stop for a sip of water, and the answer is yes. We are back. So students also really want to learn more about what the career and development opportunities will be like. So get ready to be asked a lot of questions. And on the flip side, you have to make sure you have quite a bit of answers. So your interviews need to feel like the students are getting all the information up front. They're really transparent, and that you're going to be giving them instant and very personal feedback. So the days of waiting, 5 or 6, 7 days to give students an update on their interview on if they're getting the job or if they're getting declined are over. They want the answers same day. Excuse me, my own voice is tired of me talking. Amazing, we're back. Okay, whew. The final piece that clearly I'm very excited for is continued connection. So one thing that is really important is throughout your interview process, if you have sold, that you have great opportunities to collaborate or that you have great opportunities to grow your career, that needs to be true. You need to make sure that everything you're selling during the interview process, everything you're selling online is 100% accurate, because your goal is for that student experience to be consistent during recruiting and during their work term with you. On top of that, you want to make sure that there are development check-ins that are happening. So are you checking on your managers to make sure they're making the time to develop their interns or develop their full-time hires? Is the work that they're doing impactful? And do you have growth opportunities lined up? So if you've hired 600 interns, but you only have 2 full-time jobs that you can extend at the end of the summer, you probably have, too many interns or co-ops for the amount of full-time you're able to give them. And that's also not a great student experience. Great, so I will zoom through these quickly so we have lots of time for questions. This is really just a summary slide. So overall, when we're thinking about what our students want, they want to understand your company culture, opportunities, and your process fast. They want to connect in a meaningful way. They want an honest career coach and not just a recruiter. And they want to work somewhere where they can collaborate, learn, and grow. So really the function of knowing this is as you're building your strategy, these need to be baked in and really coming back to what the student experience is. So overall, the checklist for what a good campus strategy is it's clear. Your online presence, so your career website, your LinkedIn, your job postings, they're catchy and they're to the point. It's also connected. So you give students opportunities to connect with you in a meaningful way, whether it's online, webinars, or on campus for events. It's coaching oriented. So your recruitment marketing and your process leave lots of room for coaching, feedback, and honest advice. And it's consistent. So the culture, the growth, and the collaboration that you've sold is consistent with the actual experience they're going to feel during the interview process and when they start on their first day of the job. So I will pause there because it sounds like we've got a handful of questions. So hopefully I can answer as many of those as possible.
Okay, so we'll start from the question that came in first. So it's around the email practices for reaching out to candidates. So it's around, I have been emailing candidates through my company account, but haven't received a pretty good, decent response. Is there any best practices that you would like to suggest for this?
That's a great question. So a couple of things that I would say is never BCC students. So even though it can be unbelievably time consuming, I would make sure that you're emailing each student individually. And then I also do my best to make the subject line of that email feel really exclusive. So if you're inviting them to apply for a job or inviting them for an interview, I actually make the subject line, congratulations, you're invited, and then I say, mobile developer role or something to that effect. So making it feel really exclusive and personalized in the email and making sure that you call out what you liked about their applicant profile. So having that catchy subject line, making it a one-on-one email, and then saying, after reviewing your resume, I loved your experience at TD Bank doing this, and that's why I'd love to reach out. So making it feel really personal is something that I've seen some success with. And on the flip side of that, some students are just not great at email, which is when I often give them a little creep on LinkedIn and we'll message them there. And typically that's a little bit more effective, again, because they're on that so consistently on their phone.
Perfect. So moving on to the next question, this is from Ravi. So the question is around, how do you decide which school to target when it comes to your campus strategy?
Yes, that's a great question, and you might laugh at my answer, but when I had first started in campus recruiting, the answer was Google. So basically, I would look at the kind of geographic area of my school, so I can tell you a little bit about my thought process as I worked in the Toronto area. I would Google the top technology, universities in Ontario. And then from there, I would go into all of the programs listed on their school's website and make an Excel sheet and actually look at the different offerings of those programs. So if you're hiring an engineer, you might look at all of the different computer science programs in Ontario and take a look at what some of the courses are that they're teaching. And if that's relevant for your job, you can keep those in. So I would do that kind of niche breakdown. But a lot of it truly is trial and error. So if it's your first time with campus recruiting, I would say cast your net a little bit wider. I remember I posted to almost every computer science school in Ontario the first time I had posted, just to get a sense of what candidates worked well and what candidates brought the most to the table. So I would say do some kind of deep digging in terms of the courses taught, and then come up with that list of academic programs that align to the skills you're looking for and cast that net maybe a wee bit wider than you would moving forward.
Perfect. So I guess that answers your question. Moving on to the next one. So this is around the success ratio that you get during campus recruitment. The question is basically that students at campuses have multiple offers, and they have to choose one job that they want to join. So what, according to you, is a good job actually joining to, let's say, a job offer ratio?
Okay, so how many kind of offers you'll typically extend versus how many accept?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it'll depend on what you're actually recruiting for. For co-op, there is a little bit more structure in terms of those. In Canada specifically, co-op programs follow their own recruitment process where employers essentially have to partner really closely with the school, and they have to go through a structured recruitment process and a structured offer process. In co-op specifically, what I would say a pretty strong acceptance ratio, and don't let me scare you, is about 35 to 45% accepted. That's because co-op is extremely competitive. For internships, I would say my goal is always 100%. I would say a really strong place to start would be between the 60 and 80%. Anything below 60%, there might be some kind of things you may want to dig into. For full-time, truthfully, I would say about 50%. You could definitely be happy with, because full-time opens a whole other can of worms because you're competing, across the country, and you're competing with international talent as well. So 50% is a great place to start for full-time.
Perfect. Moving on, the next question is a pretty big one. So so we usually experience that Gen Z are quite motivated and lose interest in the kind of job that they're hired for. Most of the undergrads quit within a year for higher education or for new job roles. So how do you convince the hiring managers that we need to keep pursuing a set of target schools and not just keep changing the target schools? Most of the hiring managers are millennials, and they don't just understand and connect with Gen Z when it comes to managing expectations and aspirations. How do you manage such a challenge at Intuit?
I love that question. I will say, admittedly, at Intuit, I'm so spoiled. Our managers are just, in my mind, the cream of the crop. I think they've got it all figured out. So I'll give you kind of a general answer. So what I would say is, it's less, the way I would frame it to them, and I'm sure you have in these conversations, is it sounds like it's less of a recruitment issue and more of a development issue. So it actually sounds like this is an opportunity, whether you have a program development team, so a team that really focuses on professional development, or if this is your HR business partners who would support in this. But it sounds like there needs to be some pretty significant training for your managers to understand a little bit like what we did today. So understanding what's important to Gen Z. And it sounds like they're tapping out when they feel like the work they're doing isn't impactful, and they're tapping out when they don't feel connected. So it sounds like there needs to be a really strong focus and emphasis on manager training, and understanding that giving these students opportunities to have stretch assignments, to manage projects on their own, and to have open dialogue about what the new hire or your student hire really expects is key. Because I'm sure if they're having regular one-on-ones with their manager, and their manager says, how are you feeling about the work that you're doing? If you give the student space to say, honestly, I'm a little bored, I need a stretch opportunity, problem solved. So I would say digging into kind of manager training and more of a formalized approach to that might be helpful, because the students are going to think similarly regardless of what school they come from.
Perfect. So moving on to the next question, I hope that answers the big question that we had. This question is from Richard, and the question is, if my company wants to host an event on campus for PhDs in computer science, which is historically harder to engage with, what kind of events would you recommend?
I love this question. I love really intimate events. So I would actually say, I think you're spot on with hosting your own event and not doing an event that's run by the school. I would actually coin it or call it coffee chats with engineers at insert your company name. And I would structure it as the first 10 minutes of your event will be a bit of a sell or a presentation about some of the opportunities you have. And then from there, you can go into one-on-one speed interviews or coffee chats with these people. So you can bring up 5 or 10 different managers or engineers and have one-on-one sessions with these folks and review their resume, practice interview skills, and make it a bit of a development workshop as well as a sell. And I would advertise, of course, with your target schools to those programs, but Also look at some of the clubs and associations you could tap into. So maybe looking at women in tech, or a couple of different more niche clubs that would be able to get the word out for you a little bit in a more targeted way.
Perfect. Moving on, the next question is from Neha, and it is, do you find sometimes that the student turnout is pretty low at campus events? How do you deal with this when you're hiring for multiple roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually I see about a 50% drop off from registration. So if 100 people say they're coming, 50 people actually come. So just have that expectation in mind as well. But if you're feeling like you're not getting enough people coming to your events, you might be you might be a little bit ahead of yourself. So it might be best to reevaluate the kind of events you're doing and take a step back, because if students recognize your brand and are interested in working there, you'll have a strong enough turnout that the event is worth it. But if they're not as familiar with your company's brand, it might be a great idea to use the next year to focus on large scale events where you're kind of targeting the masses. So career fairs, online webinars, and things where you're really just getting your brand out, and then you'll be in a better position to target the following year.
Great, that sounds perfect. So moving on to the next question is from Rebecca, and the question is, how are we expected to give the same day responses to candidates when we could be interviewing multiple candidates for a role? I've often seen that if I don't respond to candidates, the people don't join the job offer letter that was given to them. So what is the best thing that can be done?
Yeah, so sorry, just to understand. So the question was about how do we kind of stay on top of responding to everyone with multiple candidates?
Yes, I guess that would be it.
Yeah, it can be quite painful. One of the tips that I use is I tell students when I'll be getting back to them. So although they'll have many questions, I'll tell them, okay, thank you, I've answered these questions. You'll get feedback from me about your interview in 48 hours. And giving them a timeline makes them a little bit more comfortable, because the second they feel like they've been ghosted or forgotten about, they start to freak out a little bit. So really giving them a timeline of, thanks so much, I'm going to look into this. I'll be back in 72 hours, or I'll be back in 48 hours. Will kind of put their minds at ease.
Okay. So this is one question that has been asked by multiple people. So it seems to be the burning question for today's session. And it is around retention and engaging Gen Z these days. So the question is, what are the engagement activities that you have done or seen with your current interns or full-timers that you've hired from campuses? And also, how do you keep someone who has a joining date, let's say 3 months from now, engaged in order for them to join your company? Is it some kind of an off-site activity or a welcome lunch, etc.? So whatever you think.
That's perfect. So I'll start with the students who are currently with us. It's really important to have events that are structured throughout the entire work term. And I find the sweet spot is usually an event or two a month, and that's really it. So keeping them engaged, the kind of sparks notes on what I would do is have a great orientation day. So get them in front of some of the senior leaders at your company, get them to understand, what it is that you do. And then having about one social event each month, and perhaps on top of that, a development event each month. And a development event each month can be led by your recruiter, or maybe you can have a volunteer in the company come in. I've done things, I know at BMO we used to do like a social media session with students, so showing them how to optimize LinkedIn, and that was one webinar that they could attend. And then you can have a social event, so like a luncheon and things like that. So kind of building it out that way. As far as students where before they're coming in, and maybe there's like a 4-month gap before they actually are going to join the team, it's very simple, but I just send emails to a lot of these students once a month and say, hey, how are you doing? Wanted to check in if you have any questions, anything cool you're watching on Netflix, like a very casual interaction that way. But if you do have the capacity to build out a little bit more, great ideas are holiday cards if it falls within a holiday season, or maybe you can send welcome bundles to their home a couple of weeks in advance of their start date. That includes like a notebook, a backpack, and a couple of things to keep them excited about their experience.
Okay, so one more question that has been asked multiple times is around having a video job description. Have you ever tried it out before, Emily? A video job description?
So we haven't done a job description that's only video, but at a couple of companies I've been at, we've done videos that show what the student experience is like embedded in the job description. So I would recommend still keeping the bulk of the information the students need in the text, but it's a great idea to have your current students or previous students do like a 15-second video about why they loved their experience, and that will really sell it from a culture side of things. But I would avoid using the video as a means to communicate kind of what the expectations are for the role.
Okay. So the next question is, in the current times, how do we provide a positive feedback to the candidates who were supposed to join us on the upcoming projects, but it has been delayed from the government side, for example? And we do not want to lose them from other organizations. So anything that you would like to suggest to, considering the current COVID-19 breakout, anything that you would like to suggest to our audience?
Yeah, it's such a complicated situation. I think sometimes people don't realize how many layers there are in terms of how this impacts recruiting. You know, what I would say the best thing you can do, especially with student talent, is just be unbelievably transparent. Do the best thing you can do really is pick up the phone, tell them exactly where you're at, tell them how much you know, and then tell them what you don't know. So if you don't know when their work term will resume, it's okay to tell them that. And I would encourage you at the end of that conversation to let them know that if they need time to think about what is best for them, whether they would like to continue with this work term or search elsewhere, give them the space to do that. 9 times out of 10, they're going to stay with you. But if you don't give them the opportunity to digest and think about what their options are, that's when they start to panic a little bit. So I would just say picking up the phone, making it really personal, and being unbelievably transparent and just compassionate, because the situation will weigh on everyone a little bit differently.
That's a great answer. I guess that answers that question. Moving on to the next one, it's from Jill, and the question is, when recruiting in general, hiring for diversity as a focus is a must. With the college in focus, how do you hire diverse college students? I've had issues in the past with this due to a lack of sponsorship capabilities for international students with my company.
Yep, and that's a challenge I think most companies will face as well at times. What I would say is your biggest asset when it comes to student recruiting is your relationship with the schools, because the schools want nothing more than for their students to succeed, which naturally feeds into your talent pipeline. So I would recommend connecting with the schools that you recruit from the most and asking them what clubs are really involved, and B, will help you target diversity with whatever diversity might be for your organization right now. So, a space that we're often trying to boost is women in the technology space. Well, almost every major university has great women in technology clubs or associations. So if you identify those clubs, you can reach out to those and you can host lunch and learns or coffee chats with them, or perhaps you can sponsor an event with that club, and that's a great way to build your brand with those clubs. And you can oftentimes hire people who are a part of those associations, but typically they'll also spread out your opportunity to people in their networks who tend to be kind of similar in terms of their diversity or experience.
Perfect. So I guess we are almost ending our session now. We have answered all the questions almost. Okay, so one last question that we have is from Brittany. It's with outreach, do you experience issues with getting into inboxes due to spam filters? How do you prevent this? And she says that this is a big problem for their team.
Yes, a lot of the school's emails automatically put company emails into junk, which is really unfortunate. I find it always happens when I BCC students, so keeping kind of one-on-one emails where you can. What I would also say is if you do have, one student who's worked with you in the past and you would like to broadcast out messages to people in their network, you can actually leverage your former students to refer people to apply for your role. But if you're finding that you have a distribution list that's constantly just being sent to junk, you may have to be stuck working with some formulas to send those emails out one by one, or likewise transition to LinkedIn and do mass emails through LinkedIn Recruiter.
Perfect. So before we end this session, I would personally like to ask this question. Any tips for our campus recruiters who are not being able to go to campuses right now? Certain best practices that you think that campus recruiters can, leverage at this stage of the time with all the outbreak of the coronavirus? So any 3 tips that you think should be in the mind of a campus recruiter when it comes to, virtually trying to hire students from campuses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say tip number one is don't stop having fun with the students. It's a really stressful time and they love one-on-one connection. So it's a great opportunity for us to get creative with how we do that. What I love about HackerEarth is you have the opportunity to do online hackathons. Now is the perfect time to do things like that. It's also the perfect time for webinars. It's the perfect time for one-on-one career chats with students. So invest in your LinkedIn, invest in connecting to the students in your network, and start looking at virtual events that you can do, because this will likely impact fall, which is the biggest recruitment season in campus based on timing. So it's really a great opportunity to forward think with that.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Once again, thank you so much, Emily, for taking out time out of your schedule for being our guest speaker for today. And we were glad to have you. And one more thing is, guys, it would be great if you could share your feedbacks with us on LinkedIn. You can tag Emily at Emily Durham, and you can also tag HackerEarth at @HackerEarth on Twitter or LinkedIn. So, yep, so thank you so much, Emily, for the time and this informative session. I personally enjoyed it a lot. It was full of insights, me being almost on the edge of being a Gen Z as well as a millennial. So some things were pretty relatable for me as well. So thank you so much for this session.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was great. I really appreciate everyone taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much. So signing off right now. Thank you to all our attendees for taking out time from their schedules as well for joining us for today's session. And hope you all stay safe. Please stay indoors. The virus is pretty bad. It's spreading all over the world. So wherever you are, please stay safe, and we wish you all the best of health. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for more such HackerEarth webinars. And thank you, Emily, once again. Signing off now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.